Okay, so today we are beginning with chapter 7. And if you remember from last week, we ended at a scene where Marcus discovered that Tata was being brought to the amphitheater to fight as a gladiator. And so he develops a plan to rescue his father. He throws on a toga from his bag of clothes that he was going to be washing for his master. He steals a snake or a cobra, and he's going to break in and try and rescue his father. So, chapter 7. Marcus stepped slowly, clutching the basket. At first, he didn't notice how people moved aside for him, how slaves bowed their heads. And then he understood. His disguise was working. Nobody guessed he was just a slave. None of the guards tried to stop him as he approached the front of the parade. Marcus saw the lanista, his chest puffed out. And there was Tata. The big guard was jabbing him in the back with a spear, laughing at Tata's pain. Marcus's blood boiled as he walked toward the lanista. Closer, closer, closer. When he was just a few feet away, the lanista looked at him. Their eyes met, and Marcus saw the flash of recognition in the man's eyes. "Stop him," the lanista bellowed, pointing to Marcus. But it was too late. Marcus tore the lid off the basket. He lunged forward, and with all the strength he could gather, he thrust the open basket toward the lanista, propelling the snake into the air. The cobra soared, a twisting, hissing arrow. The snake struck the lanista in the chest and then landed on the ground, coiling itself tightly. The lanista's womanly scream rose up over the crowd, and everything went still and silent. Here's an image of that cobra coming after the lanista. Remember, he is the owner of the gladiators. People stared, hypnotized by the sight of the cobra. The creature lifted its head, rising, 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 until it was as tall as a child. It flared its great hood and then opened its mouth to expose its silky pink mouth and killer fangs. Hiss. And then, as if Marcus himself had pulled a lever, the earth started to rumble, just as it had earlier. Stones crumbled and fell from the wall surrounding the barracks. A roar echoed from deep under the ground. "It's a curse from the gods," someone shouted. The crowd erupted in panic. The lanista turned and ran, and his guards followed. Gladiators bolted. The snake slithered away. The horses screeched and reared up, tossing their riders to the ground. Marcus ran to Tata, who stared at him in confusion. "Tata," Marcus said, tossing off his toga, "it's me." Amazement lit up Tata's eyes, but there was not a second to spare. Tata grabbed Marcus's hand as though he would never let it go. "This way," Tata said, pulling Marcus to one of the riderless horses. It was a ragged white mare that looked 100 years old. One of her ears looked as if it had been chewed off. Tata grabbed the reins and soothed the horse while Marcus climbed on. Tata climbed on in front of Marcus. "Hold on tight," he said, snapping the reins. Marcus doubted the old horse could even run, but she shot forward and was soon speeding down the street. Marcus clung to Tata, his heart pounding in terror. He expected spears to fly after them, a dagger to stab him in the middle of his back. But the horse ran faster and faster. It seemed she was eager to escape her life in Pompeii, as they were. They moved so fast that Marcus felt as though they were flying. Closing his eyes, he imagined that this old white mare was the winged horse Pegasus, and that they were soaring through the clouds. When he opened his eyes, he was shocked to see they had passed through the city gates. Tata raised his fist to the heavens and let out a Latin cheer. "Essi!" They had made it. Chapter 8. That afternoon, the road to Vesuvius. They headed for the mountain Vesuvius, a massive triangle of green that loomed up to the east of Pompeii. As they left the city behind, Tata ripped the armor from his shoulders and legs and threw the pieces into a ditch. He left his helmet in a field of wheat, a trade for the old tunic he snatched from the farmer's drying line. They rode for hours, crossing orchards and olive groves, pastures and fields. Night was coming, and Tata decided they should stop in a patch of woods halfway up the mountain. They got off the mare and stretched their aching legs. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of grapes he'd snatched from a vineyard that they'd passed through. "Hungry, Peg?" Marcus said to the mare. "Peg?" Tata asked, arching one of his bushy eyebrows. "Short for Pegasus," Marcus said. Tata smiled, stroking the mare's nose. Marcus fed the grapes to Peg one by one until they were all gone. Peg smacked her lips and rubbed Marcus's cheek with her nose. "We have a friend for life, it seems," Tata said. Peg nickered as though she agreed, and Marcus and Tata laughed. It was that moment, as their laughter filled the air, that it really hit Marcus. This was not a dream, not a wish, not a desperate prayer to the gods. He and Tata were together. A jolt of happiness practically lifted him off the ground, and Tata seemed to feel it too. They looked at each other and smiled. But then a shadow passed over Marcus's heart, because as happy as he felt at this moment, he knew they were in terrible danger. "They'll come after us," Marcus whispered. "The slave hunters. Festus would hire the best, most cunning men, experts in tracking their prey." "They won't look for us up here," Tata promised. "The hunters will be searching Pompeii. It will be days before they come to the mountain. By then, we'll be gone. We'll head back to Rome, Marcus. I have no doubt that Linus's friends will help us. Somehow I need to continue Linus's work." It amazed Marcus that Tata could be so certain, so filled with hope. He draped an arm around Marcus's shoulders and looked up into the sky, admiring the bright moon and the swirl of stars. But what Marcus saw in the bright moonlight was the angry bruise on Tata's cheek, the purple scars zigzagging along his chin. How Tata must have suffered these past 2 months. Marcus had already told Tata about his time with Festus. The words had poured out of him during their ride up the mountain, until at last he had told Tata about every last moment of his time with his brutal master. Here they are heading up the mountain, and you can see the city of Pompeii down below. Tata hadn't said anything about being with the gladiators, and Marcus wanted to know. "Will you tell me what happened to you, Tata?" Marcus said. Pain flashed through Tata's eyes, and he looked away from Marcus. "That is the past now," he said. And from his tone, Marcus knew that he must not ask again. But he couldn't help thinking about what his father must have been through, and it made his blood boil. "I hate that Lanista," Marcus burst out. "And I hate Festus. I hate all of them for what they did to you, Tata. We need to get even." Yes, Marcus thought, they would get revenge. They'd set fire to Festus's villa, find the Lanista, and... But Tata whipped around, gripping Marcus's shoulders. "No, Marcus," he snapped. "Never speak like that. You must never let hatred take over. Then you are no better than Festus, and hatred like that will destroy you." Marcus blinked, stung by Tata's sharp tone. "I'm sorry, Tata," Marcus said. Tata's face softened. "There is goodness in the world, Marcus, and kindness. You cannot forget that." Goodness? Kindness? Marcus had seen none of that lately. If there was one thing Marcus had learned these past 2 months, it was this. The world was a dark, evil place. Only the most ruthless would survive. But Marcus said none of that to Tata, who would not approve of such dark thoughts. And they were both so tired, they led Peg into a small grove of trees and tied her up for the night. Tata stretched out on a grassy patch. "Tomorrow our new life begins," he whispered, and within seconds he was fast asleep. Marcus lay down next to Tata, but he couldn't get comfortable. His muscles ached from the long ride, but it was the strange noises that kept snapping him awake. Distant rumbles, low hisses. Was he dreaming? Once he drifted to sleep, but was awakened when the earth seemed to be shaking. He sat up, wondering if Tata felt it too. But Tata was sound asleep. Was Marcus imagining things? Maybe what he was hearing were just rumbles of his own angry heart. But Peg seemed restless too, stamping her feet and snorting. Finally, Marcus got up and stood with her, stroking her patchy fur, resting his cheek against her warm head. He looked down at Pompeii, dimly lit by oil lamps and torches. He made out the shapes of houses crowded together along the city walls, the boats moored in the harbor. Marcus hugged Peg. It's okay, he told her. We're with Tata now. We're safe up here. He knew that was true, that the slave hunters were far away and that Festus was too busy with his important guest to be thinking too much about his escaped slave. Still, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that there was something lurking up here on the mountain, something even more dangerous than the slave hunters. But what could it be? Chapter 9. It was close to dawn when Marcus finally fell asleep, and right away he tumbled into a dream. He was on a quest with Hercules to kill the monstrous Hydra, an enormous serpent with 9 heads. Just one puff of her poisonous breath could kill. Marcus waded silently through the dark and misty swamp, pushing aside sharp stalks of grass. And then, just ahead, there she was, the hideous serpent. Marcus stopped, frozen as the beast rose up from the swamp. One by one, her 9 horrific heads emerged from the mist, staring at him with glowing yellow eyes, leering with dripping, glistening fangs. And here's an image from his dream. And then, huff, a burning, rotten stench rushed into Marcus's lungs. The poisonous Hydra breath. Marcus gagged and coughed. His throat burned. His chest felt as if he would explode. Marcus, Marcus, a voice called. Hercules? Marcus! Marcus's eyes popped open, and the nightmare fell away. Tata was kneeling next to him, calling his name, shaking him awake. It was all a dream. Relief poured over him as he realized he wasn't in a swamp with the Hydra. He was on the mountain Vesuvius with Tata. But wait, something was terribly wrong. The air was still poisonous. The Hydra was still puffing gusts of her burning breath into Marcus's lungs. But there was no Hydra. That burning, poisonous smell was here. Marcus, Tata choked. Get up. The air has gone bad. Tata helped Marcus to his feet and they staggered together toward Peg. Marcus's head pounded. Tears poured from his stinging eyes. His lungs were on fire and he gasped for breath. He felt dizzy. They couldn't last much longer in this air. Peg was rearing in panic, white foam spewing from her mouth. Tata fumbled with her rope, finally untying it. They all stumbled out of the grove of trees, where the air was miraculously clear. Tata and Marcus collapsed to the ground, gulping the fresh air into their lungs. Tata, Marcus rasped. What was that? Sulfur gas, Tata replied, his voice ragged from coughing. There's no doubt. I smelt it once before, when Linus and I were visiting a gold mine in Africa. We were deep underground. Sulfur gas can be deadly. It can kill in minutes. We barely made it to the surface in time. Tata looked back into the grove of trees. It's highly unusual to find sulfur gas above the ground, he said. He stood and climbed onto a boulder that jutted out from the grassy slope, looking all around. Marcus saw a hint of worry in his father's eyes, but mainly what he saw was curiosity, a hunger to learn and understand. It was the same look Tata used to get in Linus Silius's library when he was chasing down a new theory. Suddenly, Tata was not a slave on the run. He was a scientist searching for answers. And the truth was that after spending a lifetime working with Linus, Tata probably knew more about science and nature than most people in the Empire. In recent years, Linus would ask Tata to join him when important guests came, eager for his friends to hear Tata's ideas. Tata hopped down from the boulder. He held out his hand to Marcus, pulling him to his feet. Let's keep heading up the mountain, he said, handing Marcus's Peg's reins. We'll discover more as we get closer to the top. Tata set out, climbing the rocky path. Marcus took a deep breath and gave Peg's reins a tug. But the mare didn't budge. She looked at Marcus with her wise brown eyes. Her expression was so thoughtful. Marcus would not have been shocked if she had opened her mouth and started to speak to him. What is it? Marcus said. The mare looked up the mountain, and she stamped her foot. You don't want to go up there, do you? Snort. Me neither, Marcus said. Tata's voice shouted out, Marcus! Marcus and Peg eyed each other. We can't let Tata head up there by himself, Marcus said. Peg made a noise that sounded like a sigh, and she stepped forward. Together, They followed Tata toward the top of Vesuvius.